carpooling before it had a name. Long before any app existed for it, housewives were already sharing rides naturally. Neighbors on the same street attended the same church, visited the same stores, and brought children to the same activities. Going together simply made sense. One woman drove one week, another drove the next. Nobody made a formal arrangement out of it. It was just considered good neighborly sense. It reduced wear on any one family's vehicle and built genuine relationships between neighbors at the same time. Today, this habit is completely worth reviving. A simple conversation with a neighbor or friend who travels similar routes regularly can set up an easy, informal rotation. Consistent ride sharing for regular commitments can save $200 to $400 annually, and the company on the way there and back was always part of the value too. Walking is the first answer. Housewives back then didn't automatically reach for car keys for every short trip. Walking was simply the natural first response to anywhere nearby. The pharmacy, the library, a neighbor's house, these were reached on foot without a second thought. Today, most Americans drive to destinations less than a mile away without considering the alternative. That habit, repeated dozens of times monthly, carries a cost most families never actually sit down to measure. The shift is simple. Before getting in the car, ask one honest question. Could I walk there? If the answer is yes, walk. Families who make walking their first instinct for short distances can save $150 to $300 annually. And the calm that comes with an unhurried walk was always worth something too. Maintaining the family vehicle before problems started. Back then, the family car was often the single most valuable thing a household owned outside of their home. Housewives took that seriously. They kept track of what needed attention, noticed small issues early, and made sure nothing was neglected until it became expensive. The mindset was simple. You take care of things before they break. Fixing broken things costs far more than preventing the problem. Tires were checked. Small concerns were addressed early. The use it up, wear it out approach applied fully to transportation. Today, staying consistent with basic vehicle maintenance is one of the most reliable ways to avoid large, unexpected costs. Families who treat regular upkeep as a normal household priority rather than an unwelcome chore can avoid hundreds, sometimes over $1,000 in unexpected repair bills every single year. Using the library as a full entertainment resource. Most people today think of the library as a place to borrow books, but housewives back then understood it as the family's primary entertainment resource. Books, magazines, recorded music, community program schedules, children's storytelling sessions, the library provided all of it freely and consistently. Regular library visits were built into the weekly household rhythm, the same way any other routine was. The family went, they browsed, they borrowed, and they came home with a full week of reading and listening already taken care of at no cost. Modern American libraries have expanded well beyond what even our grandmothers had access to. Audiobooks, digital magazines, museum passes, online learning courses, and recreational equipment are available today with nothing more than a library card. Families who shift entertainment consumption toward library resources can save $100 to $250 every single month. Borrowing before, buying for recreation. Before anything was purchased for leisure or recreation, the first instinct back then was always to borrow, from a neighbor, from a relative, from the library. Borrowing wasn't considered awkward. It was considered sensible. Board games, sports equipment, hobby supplies, and reading materials moved freely between households. Nobody purchased something to try before knowing whether they would genuinely enjoy it long term. That felt wasteful, because it was. Today, many libraries lend tools, games, and even passes to local attractions. Neighborhood lending through community groups has never been easier. Before purchasing anything for leisure, ask whether it can be borrowed first. That single consistent habit can save $150 to $300 annually on avoided impulse purchases alone, making entertainment a community habit. Fun back then wasn't something you bought. Church socials, neighborhood gatherings, town fairs, library reading programs, community picnics, these were the entertainment. Families looked forward to them genuinely. Children built lasting memories around these simple shared experiences without anyone feeling like they were missing something better. Housewives were the quiet organizers of this. They knew what was happening in the neighborhood. They kept track of community events and built the family's social calendar around free options first, before anything paid was even considered. Today, free and low-cost community events still happen in almost every American town. Parks host free concerts, libraries run free programs for all ages, civic groups hold seasonal gatherings open to all neighbors. Families who make these a genuine first priority rather than an afterthought can save $100 to $250 every single month on entertainment alone, planning outings around free seasonal events. Housewives back then paid close attention to the season. Summer brought outdoor concerts in the park. Autumn meant harvest festivals. Winter brought civic celebrations. Spring meant parades and outdoor markets. These events were anticipated genuinely and planned around deliberately. They read the local newspaper. They checked library bulletin boards. When something free was approaching, it went on the family calendar first, before any paid option was considered. A family whose leisure calendar is already full of free events naturally spends far less without ever feeling deprived. Today, following your local parks department and community center calendar takes minutes. Signing up for civic organization newsletters keeps free events visible and easy to plan around. Families who prioritize seasonal community events can reduce monthly entertainment spending by $75 to $200, depending on how actively they engage with what is already freely available around them. Reusing and repurposing entertainment materials. Nothing that could still be enjoyed was replaced before its time. Books were read more than once. Games were played until the pieces were memorized. Records were listened to until every song felt like an old friend. The use-it-up, wear-it-out mindset applied fully to entertainment. There was no pressure to constantly consume something new. Enjoyment wasn't measured by novelty. Magazines made full rounds through several families before anyone considered them finished. Books moved between neighbors and relatives freely. Nothing sat idle when it could still bring enjoyment to someone nearby. Today, revisiting books already owned, rotating games back into regular use, and sharing materials with neighbors before each household purchases separately are habits that cost nothing to start. Before buying anything new for entertainment, ask genuinely whether something already owned could serve the same purpose. This single, consistent question can save $100 to $200 annually on entertainment purchases. Avoiding impulse outings through weekly planning. Back then, outings were discussed and considered before they happened. Housewives thought through the coming week's leisure time in advance and decided how it would be spent before the weekend arrived. That quiet, advanced planning meant free alternatives were already in place when free time came. Today, a spontaneous weekend outing can easily cost $50 to $100 by the time entry fees and incidental spending are added together. And because it was unplanned, it rarely feels like a real expense until later. Spending 10 minutes at the start of each week thinking through upcoming leisure time and deciding in advance how it will be spent is all this habit requires. Families who plan leisure consistently rather than spontaneously can save $150 to $300 monthly simply by reducing unplanned spending on outings. Here is the exact output following your locked-in template with no deviations. Choosing simple leisure that lasted all day. A trip to a public park back then wasn't a 30-minute stop. It was a full afternoon. Families brought simple things from home, settled in, and stayed. Children played without structured entertainment. Adults talked and rested. Nobody felt the pull to move on because moving on would cost money. A visit to a lake, a riverside walk, a public garden, these destinations gave generously without asking anything in return. They didn't have a closing time, creating urgency, or a gift shop at the exit. Just open space, fresh air, and unhurried time together.
Today, nearly every American community has free public spaces offering exactly this kind of lasting leisure. State parks, nature trails, public beaches, and riverside paths exist in abundance. Choosing one free destination and committing to spending real time there rather than moving between multiple paid activities can save $100 to $250 monthly. Our grandmothers didn't need the day to be exciting from start to finish. They needed it to be restful and shared.
Walking and cycling as transportation and recreation together. Back then, walking and cycling served double duty naturally. They weren't just ways to get somewhere, they were also how families spent leisure time and enjoyed their neighborhoods without spending anything at all. The line between transportation and recreation was quietly blurred, and that overlap was genuinely valuable. Sunday afternoon walks through the neighborhood were common weekend activities. Families cycled together on quiet roads. The family bicycle was maintained carefully and used regularly for errands, leisure rides, and neighborhood exploration all at once. Today, reconnecting those two purposes means using a walk or bike ride to handle a nearby errand while enjoying the outing at the same time. Treating the bicycle as a practical household tool again, rather than equipment stored in the garage. Families who integrate walking and cycling back into both transportation and leisure can save $150 to $350 annually across reduced travel costs and avoided paid recreational activities combined. Entertaining at home as a genuine first choice. Going out for entertainment as a regular weekly habit simply wasn't how most families operated back then. Going out was occasional and special. The rest of the time, entertainment happened at home, and housewives were the quiet architects of making that feel genuinely enjoyable, rather than like settling for less. Home entertainment looked different from what most people picture today. Neighbors came over. Card games lasted entire evenings. Someone played an instrument while others listened. Housewives created an atmosphere that made staying home feel like a real choice worth making, rather than a fallback option. When home was genuinely welcoming, the pull toward expensive outings was naturally weaker. Families who prioritize home-based social entertainment over regular paid outings can save $150 to $300 every single month. Our grandmothers always knew the best evenings rarely cost much. The value was always in the people, not the venue. Writing letters instead of expensive long-distance communication. Long-distance calls in the 1960s and 70s were billed by the minute, and those minutes added up faster than most families expected. Housewives managed this with a habit that feels almost completely foreign today. They wrote letters. Not occasionally, regularly. Keeping in touch with relatives in other states and old friends who had moved away was handled almost entirely through the written word. A letter cost only a stamp. It could be written slowly over a day or two and carried everything that needed to be said without a ticking clock in the background. Today, free video and voice platforms exist and work beautifully. The deeper habit worth borrowing is the practice of intentional, unhurried communication, rather than constant, spontaneous contact pulling toward premium services. Families who audit communication expenses and shift deliberately toward free alternatives can save $50 to $150 annually. There was always something unhurried about a letter that said the relationship mattered enough to sit down and give it real attention. Keeping leisure expectations simple and sustainable. Most people don't think about this anymore, but back then, housewives understood something quietly important: the expectation that every weekend needed to be an event, every outing needed to be memorable, and every leisure hour needed to be filled with something stimulating was simply not part of how life was approached. Contentment with ordinary, simple pleasures wasn't resignation, it was a genuine and practiced skill. A front porch conversation, a neighborhood walk at dusk, an afternoon with a borrowed book. These things were considered enough because they genuinely were enough. Today, resetting leisure expectations towards simpler, sustainable pleasures is perhaps the most valuable habit of all. Not because expensive experiences have no value, but because the quiet assumption that ordinary life requires constant upgrading is one of the most reliable drivers of unnecessary spending.
Families who genuinely embrace simple leisure as a first choice rather than a compromise find that both their budgets and their stress levels reflect that choice meaningfully over time.
Avoiding impulse outings through weekly planning. Back then, outings were discussed and considered before they happened. Housewives thought through the coming week's leisure time in advance and decided how it would be spent before the weekend arrived. That quiet advance planning meant free alternatives were already in place when free time came. Today, a spontaneous weekend outing can easily cost $50 to $100 by the time entry fees and incidental spending are added together. And because it was unplanned, it rarely feels like a real expense until later. Spending 10 minutes at the start of each week, thinking through upcoming leisure time and deciding in advance how it will be spent is all this habit requires. Families who plan leisure consistently rather than spontaneously can save $150 to $300 monthly simply by reducing unplanned spending on outings.
When you look back at how housewives managed transportation and entertainment across those decades, what stands out most isn't how little they had, it's how little they needed. Life was organized thoughtfully, leisure was chosen carefully, movement was purposeful. And within all of that quiet intention, there was a genuine sense of calm that most modern households spend a great deal trying to find and never quite reaching. The habits we cover today aren't relics of a time that no longer applies. They're practical, working strategies that translate directly into modern American life. Planning trips in advance, using the library fully, borrowing before buying, building leisure around free seasonal events, choosing slow, lasting outings over quick, expensive ones. Every one of these habits still works. Every one still saves real money. And perhaps more importantly, every one brings back something that inflation cannot take away, a sense of control over your own week, a feeling that your money is working for your life rather than quietly disappearing into habits you never consciously chose. A simple life costs less for a reason, and that reason has never changed. Out of everything we covered today, which of these 15 habits feels most natural to bring back into your own life? Is it the weekly trip planning, the library visits, or maybe just choosing to walk somewhere you would normally drive? Leave a comment below and let us know. It is always wonderful to hear which of these old-fashioned habits still resonates with people today. If this felt useful, a like goes a long way in helping this channel reach others looking for the same kind of quiet, practical wisdom. And if you would like to see more, subscribing means you will not miss what is coming next. Next time, we are going back to those same decades to look at how housewives managed clothing and everyday household needs with a level of resourcefulness that most of us have simply never been taught. It's a good one. We'll see you there.